Hey there, this is Mr. Icarus, and welcome to yet another edition of Doom Mod Madness. This time round, we are checking out Kriegsland, Bloodordnung. I hope I pronounced that right. Probably sounded a little bit more Swedish than anything, but that translates to Warfield Blood Order, an appropriately edgy name for this Wolfenstein-inspired gameplay mod, taking its inspiration more from the New Order than it does from the classic titles, aside from, obviously, the enemy sprites. That said, this mod doesn't really seem all that concerned with being a slavish recreation of the modern Wolfenstein gameplay style, instead cherry-picking elements of that gameplay experience and bringing them into Doom. And what that really means at the core of it is you're going to get a lot of interesting Wolfenstein-themed and inspired weaponry, and also the ability to dual-wield the vast majority of them, because really, that's what BJ Blazkowicz is all about these days, getting two dakka machines in both hands and blasting Nazi faces off. Naturally, if you do decide to dual wield, you will first have to acquire at least two of the specified weapon, but before then you'll find that these weapons are more than effective on their own. This is especially apparent when you're dealing with lower tier enemies such as standard soldiers and dogs, but where the dual wielding really comes into its own is when you're facing off against more heavily armored robotic type enemies, and that is what really occupies the upper echelons of the enemy variants here. Robots. Big Nazi robots. Actually, there's a robot on this very stage for us to test our armaments out on. In this room, we've got a Terminator looking son of a bitch. Let's take these out quick. They lob explosive grenades, obviously hazardous to your health, and this will enable us to get this weapon. No, I can't pronounce the name of it, but it does fire sonic blasts, and that is rather cool. You know what's cooler than the sonic blast weapon, however? The super shotgun. Because when you have to weigh up the effectiveness of a weapon that essentially blows really hard on your enemy and a weapon that forcibly ejects a crap ton of lead pellets into your enemy's faces, I think I'm probably going to go for this one. I mean, it's also a case of satisfying feedback as well. When you compare this against the sonic weapon, this just flat out always feels better to fire. It's a bit of an unfair contest, if I'm going to be honest. And adding insult to injury, the sonic weapon is not dual wieldable, but guess what? That's right, the super shotgun is. I believe in total this mod features 7 dual wieldable weapons according to the forum blurb, but I'm pretty sure I personally counted 8. But I'm sure that's something we'll be able to test out a little further into this video. Make no mistake, dual wielding is always a lot of fun, but when it comes to personal preference, there's always a way I enjoy it best, and this is a mod that thankfully indulges me on that front. It's not simply a case of getting both weapons on screen and firing them at the same time with a single trigger. No, this lets you independently fire each weapon in your left and right hand according to your left and right trigger button, which pleases me greatly. It's a small thing, but it allows me a little bit of control depending on how much dakka I'm willing to inflict. It also allows you to control yourself a little better on the front of ammo conservation, because despite having twice the firepower in your hands, you're also going to be expending twice the ammunition. Now, unfortunately, because I lack any kind of self-control, I did find myself running out of ammunition quite frequently, but I can freely acknowledge that that is just my own damn fault. What did tend to trip me up, however, is that as I got deeper into my playthrough and amassed more weaponry, I frequently found it difficult to be able to switch to a weapon that actually had any ammunition in it. You see, a few of the weapons here do in fact share ammunition pools, a lot of the machine guns for example, and the game doesn't really do a great job of switching you to something that you can actually defend yourself with, often just flashing up the no ammo prompt when you've run dry, leaving you a little bit in the lurch. I'm sure you can imagine the situation. Surrounded by enemies, you've just run dry on your favorite dakka combination, and now you're stuck trying to cycle through the weapon keys because this mod features 19 weapons in total. Naturally, that means that you're going to have to check which weapon slot contains the weapon that you're aiming for, and you've also got to remember whether that weapon pool is something that you can actually utilize. It's faff where faff shouldn't be present. It's something that does occasionally get in the way of a good firefight and something that can occasionally lead to an untimely or frustrating death. It does sap ever so slightly the fun that's present at the core of Kriegsland here, but thankfully it's not enough to ruin the experience. It's a small blemish, if anything. Anyway, enough nitpicking critique. Let's run through the armory, shall we? We got the knife to kick things off, and then we've got the chainsaw replacement here, which looks really familiar to me, but I just can't place it for some reason. Someone will have to let me know about that one. But in slot 1, we've got a automatic pistol here, which is good up to mid-range, but the Luger, which is also in slot 1, is just a lot more accurate at longer ranges, at the sacrifice of, obviously, fire rate. We've already met both entries in the shotgun category here. We've got the super shotgun, which I admit could be a bit meatier, and we've got the regular shotgun, which I can't really complain about. It shotguns pretty well. It's about as shotgun as a shotgun can get. We've also got the machine gun category here, which contains an admirable amount of dakka. I'm going to refrain from naming these guns individually because firstly I can never remember them, and secondly I usually get it wrong. But when it comes to the smaller gun here, there's a neat little Easter egg when you aim down the sight. Obviously that's going to be banned in Germany. And moving swiftly upwards, we get to the grenade launcher. I've got a bad reputation with grenade launchers. I always use them in too small a space, I always end up taking splash damage, and I never seem to be able to land direct hits. That's why I usually just go for a direct toss of the grenade, which seems to do the same job but a lot more effectively for me for some reason. We've already met the sonic gun here, which is cool in theory, but in practice turns out to be kind of meh. The one after that, however, is kind of familiar, especially if you've ever played Russian Overkill, but here it's in fact a lightning gun, whereas in Russian Overkill it was an overpowered laser-spewing death machine. We've also got the good old-fashioned Flamethrower, which does exactly what it says on the tin, throws flames, burns Nazis to death, job done, no complaints. Next one up, however, is something you'll recognize from Russian Overkill again, only here it feels like it's some sort of BFG light style weapon, which is unfortunately a little underwhelming. But this more than makes up for it. This, in my opinion, is the peak dakka of this mod, and it has a wonderful effect on enemies. I mean, just look at that death effect. It's fantastic. I'm not even sure what's happening, but it's badass. So yeah, that weapon pretty much wins the day, and the next one up unfortunately has to live in the shadow of such badassery. It's a fairly effective pew-pew laser gun. The trajectory that the lasers fly is kind of unusual, but hey, does the job. The next weapon tier up from this, however, feels like a bit of a downgrade, all things considered. I mean, sure, this fires explosive shots, but it's tremendously slow in terms of fire rate. Also, you can do yourself a fair bit of splash damage if you're not careful. You also get access to a sniper rifle. You can zoom in, you can shoot Nazis. It's a sniper rifle. Not got much more to say than that, really. And then this, which I refer to as the heavy sniper rifle, which actually has a rather nifty reload effect if you look at the bottom right-hand corner of the gun whenever I fire it. Also displays a ready to fire and reloading text when you're scoped in as well. But with that out of the way, we now enter the giddy heights, the land of sunshine and happiness that is dual wielding. And handily, you can hit the 0 button on your keys and just cycle through all of the dual wielding combinations that you currently have access to, which is tremendously handy. Lets you switch between them on the fly without having to cycle to the individual tier and then maybe pressing another button to get the dual wielding option up. And yeah, everything is better when you have dual wielding. Dual wielding grenade launchers, dual wielding laser guns, Lugers, you name it. Everything is better when you've got one of them in each hand. In my opinion, this is where Kriegsland shines the brightest, and my only bugbear with this is that there aren't more weapons that you can dual wield. Where's my dual wielding miniguns that turns Nazis inexplicably to ashes? Why is that not a thing? Please include that, for the love of God. Go nuts, throw logic out the window. Give me full dual-wielding dakka, goddammit. In terms of the other guns, there's certainly some improvements that could be made, a few tweaks, a few bits of flair added to help them stand out from the crowd. The sonic weapon, for example, just feels very underwhelming to actually fire. The effect it has on enemies is not very memorable, and ideally when dealing with that kind of weapon, I'm imagining Nazi heads exploding. You know, that sheer amount of sonic force pulsing through an enemy body should be doing something fairly devastating, but at the moment that effect isn't really there, and the weapon fades into the armory as a result. Same goes for that rifle on the high tier weapon button, which fires explosive rounds but has a tremendously slow fire rate. When it hits an enemy, I'm expecting a similar effect to what happens when a grenade goes off next to an enemy. They just turn into a bloodied corpse and fall to pieces, but that doesn't happen at the moment. And again, similar effect to the sonic weapon, it kind of fades into the rest of the armory as a result. There's much more satisfying and interesting options to use here. But in terms of things that I quite enjoy about Kriegsland, there's a fair few of them. I mean, there's the dual wielding for one, that should be obvious. I also like the fact that you won't always run into the same weapon drop on subsequent playthroughs of a map. Thanks to the variety of weapons here, that can in fact change, and that leads to a nice little amount of replayability. I also really enjoy the variety of enemies here. I mean, to the untrained eye, you may just be seeing a lot of Nazi soldiers, but in fact there are a few interesting variations to run across here, totaling up around 70, I believe. And judging by that number, I still have a ways to go before I see every single one of them. I'm guessing that most of them will be tucked away in the later levels of various map packs, replacing various higher tier enemies. But overall, Kriegsland is okay. It's a decent gameplay mod. It's got a ways to go in terms of becoming really goddamn satisfying, but the groundwork has been laid. There's some cool stuff in here, and I'm looking forward to seeing it expanded on, because this is most assuredly not the final version of Kriegsland. There's tweaks to be made, there's things that can be added later on down the line by the author, and I'm looking forward to checking them out. But if you're interested in checking out this current version of Kriegsland, the link, as usual, is in the description below, as is the link for the map pack that I'm using in this video, which is called Legacy of Heroes. I found it rather fitting for the Wolfenstein theme. In any case, I hope you enjoyed this video. Feel free to let me know what you thought in the comments below, and feel free to suggest any mods you'd like to see me cover in future episodes of Doom Mod Madness. This has been Mr. Icarus. Thank you very much for watching. Icarus out.